This notion of wherever we go, there we are. It's actually a pretty simple and common saying. I'm assuming that you've probably heard of it. But if you haven't, hopefully I will help illuminate what this means. Its meaning, I don't know if it was intended that way from the beginning or not, is very profound. Very profound. The levels at which we can travel with that simple concept of wherever you go, there you are, is powerful. I remember the first time that it began to dawn on me. So I'm gonna start this live stream with a little storytelling. I hope that you're up for a story. Grab your popcorn, as they say, right? So I remember the first time. I was about 19 years old, and I had just come back from a pretty epic traveling excursion. I left, a friend of mine took me down south and drove me down there and dropped me off on the middle of a highway. And from there, I hitchhiked for a total of 6 months, I believe it was, something like that. I hit Mardi Gras. I hit spring break in Key West. You know, I did a lot of wild and crazy things. And it was an amazing experience. What I really didn't realize at that time was that I was in the act of running. I was chasing something and running at the same time, if that makes any sense. I was chasing experience. I've often joked that I think I read too many Jack Kerouac novels. If you haven't read any, then you won't know what I'm talking about. But he talked a lot about hitchhiking the country and you know, all kinds of cool things. And I definitely was true. I mean, it was inspiring to me. And after so much, you know, reading things like that, getting involved with what the hippie movement was all about, I had to do it, right? So I was chasing that. That's what I'm trying to share. At the same time, probably less or more dimly aware, I was running. I was running from some inner demons that I had. Now, those 6 months worked perfectly in both of those things, meaning the chasing and the running. It succeeded in what I was looking for in a way, right? Because it was very distracting. I mean, I was always involved in something new and exciting and challenging, sometimes, you know, crazy and intense. But it kept me distracted from these inner demons, if that makes any sense. Well, 6 months later, I find myself home. It didn't take very long before these inner demons started to reemerge. What was my response to that? Well, I think it's what we typically... So I look back. I had just come from this incredible experience, and I look back and I thought, you know what? I was happiest in Key West. I mean, and I had spent months there, by the way. I didn't tell that part of the story. Like, I didn't just in and out. I actually ended up staying there because I was enjoying myself so much. I was meeting people and having great experiences. And I actually stayed there for a few months during that 6-month excursion. So, Key West. That's the key to happiness. It sounds silly to me now, but it made a lot of sense to me then. So, I up and left for Key West again. Strange enough, it didn't even take a week or two before this notion of wherever I go, there I am, started to dawn on me in a very palpable way. These challenges that I was experiencing before my really cool experience, and then again after when I returned home, were waiting there for me, so to speak, right? In Key West too. That's because I brought them with me. Before I get into any more about, you know, wherever we go, there we are. If you enjoy these videos, I want to ask you to please like the video, leave a comment, hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed already. If you're watching on Facebook, like my Facebook page, like the video, please comment. I enjoy that immensely. And I thank you in advance for that. So wherever we go, there we are. I'm sure you could sense it in that story, right? Maybe you've experienced it in your own life. It isn't just about traveling. It isn't just about location, right? Another very common way that we engage in this sort of thinking, right? This is some sort of belief system or way of analyzing and making sense of the world, that there's something wrong with the outside. So if I change that, or I'm missing something, and if I could get it out there, like this location stinks, right? I remember feeling that way so strongly in my youth, right? Not because of my family or anything, but just there was just like this impulse for more, right? And that this small town mentality or something, right? That there's this inner thing that we need, that we're missing, and if we could find the right partner. I remember that one. Does that sound familiar? If I found the right partner, everything would be solved in a certain way. And of course, I think we all know that's a naive notion, but we all indulge in it. Like, that's what I'm missing. If I could find that right person, then I wouldn't have this feeling anymore. I could deal with my inner world differently. If I accomplished this goal, I fell into that one big time. If I could just open this business, this dream that I have brewing inside of me, this is my own story again. If I did that, then I would find my purpose in life, and then I would be fulfilled, right? Then I could stop running. I could stop chasing, because I would have it. I would have the right partner and the right business and the right environment, and my life would be good. Does any of this sound familiar? Have any of you found it that way? I can honestly say for me, I never did. And I did lots, hitchhiking the country at 19 is a pretty unusual thing to do, right? I don't think there's a ton of people who've done that. It kind of fits my nature. I've always been that sort of person. I've done a lot of things that few people have done. Chasing, running. Bigger things like that, right? Opening businesses, buying buildings, moving, selling everything, traveling the country at a later date. I did so many things like this, running and chasing. I can honestly report, after all of that none of it delivered what I was looking for. Now, that doesn't mean it didn't deliver anything. This is a really important thing to mention. Because the moment I say you're not going to find it that way, that doesn't mean don't do anything. Don't pursue your dreams. Don't look for the right partner. That's not what I'm saying. It means don't put burdens on them. Don't ask them to give you something that they cannot give. It's not fair to your partner. It's not fair to your business. It's not fair to your home. They can't fill this emptiness, this void. This harkens back to the conversation we just had, well, actually a couple ago, right, about fear. Seeing beyond fear. The fact is that we're looking at that when we experience this, we're experiencing this sense of empty, of nothingness, of a void. And we don't like it. It scares the crap out of us, right? And that went back to this seeing beyond separation, when we thought that we believed, or when we believed, in our thinking and in our senses, we felt separate. And all of a sudden there was this distance, right? I know I'm beating on the same drum, but I'm hoping that you can see again that repetition is not redundancy, that there's something here to really look at, even in this. If you're looking for something to give you this sense of, or to fill this hole that you feel like you have, if you do, I'm assuming most of us do. It's rare that a human being is walking around without this inner sense of something missing, like a puzzle piece, right? And that's what I mean. That's why we think maybe that partner, that's it. That's got to be it, right? We're built to partner, human beings, right? It's obviously when we do it, everyone does it. Everyone seeks it out, or almost everyone, right? It's this inner urge, and that's what it is. That's what I'm missing. I just need the right partner to complete me. I can say that my wife and I have had the success that we've had at varying degrees at varying times, right? But I feel like we're in a very good spot. I'm very grateful to experience this relationship. But when my wife and I met, I think a seed was already sown within us, in each of us, gratefully, that we were not going to fulfill each other. Now, don't get me wrong. We got caught up in all sorts of romantic notions, and when we first met, it was all fireworks and, passion. But we knew. We talked about it. I remember it very clearly, right? We had already experienced thinking that somebody else was going to do that for us. A couple of times for both of us, I think. So we had started to learn, he's not going to be able to do it for me. She's not going to be able to do that for me. It's not fair for me to ask that of her. Does that make any sense? Because she can't give it. I'm very grateful because that helped us in our relationship as we stumbled into problems, right? We weren't looking to the other one to solve it. We always turned back. And now we're stumbling into the territory of what does this mean? That if wherever I go, there I am. What does this mean? Well, one of the simplest ways we can start to talk about this is the way I opened the book that never saw the light of day, the Know Thyself Perspective book. The opening line was, "You are the filter through which all of life proceeds." So you are the determining factor to what you experience and how you experience it. Now, again, let's quickly point out, does that mean if someone's poking you in the eye, you don't move? Of course not. Okay? So we don't want to go, try to use this kind of very dualistic mindset of like, well, wait a minute. So what you're saying is everything depends on my inner experience. No, if you're experiencing physical pain, you do something to alleviate it, right? But at the same time, even that can be greatly benefited by realizing that how you interpret that pain and what's actually causing that pain is deeper than just the physical thing that's happening. In another word, even in a strange way, if you think, I've never actually had this thought until right now, even in a strange way, if you think about that, right? If somebody's physically or something's physically paining you, somewhere within, you figure out how to move, right? Something within you has to happen. And you say, change that, move, push it away. You see it? It still comes from within you, even that response, even the correction of that error, if you want to call it that, right? This is on a very gross level. But this is not even what we were talking about, right? Because this missing piece, this thing that we're all running around trying to find, this piece of the puzzle, has nothing to do with anything like that, really. Very rarely. And if it does, actually, these sorts of conversations probably won't interest you all that much. Meaning, if you're having that sort of a physical reality check, like you're starving, you're going to take care of that first before you're going to sit here and listen to some guy talk about wherever I go, there I am. Can you feel that? But more than likely, you've got food figured out. You've got shelter figured out. You've got a decent amount of clothing to wear that keeps you warm or cool. So now here we are, though. We're still missing something. This is when the real journey, in a certain way, of a human being, the capacity that a human being has, begins. Wherever you go, there you are. You can't get away from that simple reality. This is the point of, like I often say, if chasing and running, like think about my story, worked, great. I wouldn't be sitting here talking about it, right? But it doesn't. It doesn't. Again, if you go back, what's real with Adrien, right? If we come back to that concept or a conversation about how I chased it for 6 months on the open road, I was seeking those three things. I was seeking joy and peace and freedom. I remember that so much, like that sense of freedom. I was going to get it from the open road. And I did for a moment. I did. But it was circumstantial freedom. It depended on my circumstances. Can you see that? It wasn't true freedom. The moment something shifted, I didn't feel that way anymore. Matter of fact, I started to become a slave. And I did do this, by the way, because I enjoyed that traveling experience so much. I just started traveling a lot every time I could. I became a slave to that urge, right? Chasing that sense of freedom. And I don't want to say each time it got less and less, but each time it got maybe a little more complicated. Does that make any sense? Like all of a sudden it took a little bit more. It took a little bit of something else different yet again. That was the thing. I thought Key West was going to solve my problem. Like, that's it. It was so great down there. All I got to do is go back down there and live that life again, and it'll be perfect again. I'll just have a great time. Well, guess what? Key West wasn't the same when I showed up. I wasn't the same when I showed up. Circumstances change. What was the same? Me. I want to get into a little bit of what these inner issues can be too. I had these demons that I hinted to. I'm not going to get into my specifics of the demons that I was dealing with, but I did indeed have them. It was part of why I ran. Again, I wasn't overly conscious of that, funny enough. I should have been, I think, but I wasn't. But I became very conscious of it, especially when I came back and then when I came back again. This whole, fundamentally, it comes from that thing I've walked you through in the last 4 live streams. So if you haven't watched them, I highly recommend. I think that you'll get a lot from them. This whole sense of, believing in our senses and feeling separate and, then having this experience of fear, this whole, hierarchy or developmental thing that happens to us as humans. It's very fundamental. I kind of want to talk about something more personal, though. Like, that's so fundamental, it's abstract in a certain way. I was hurting. I had pain in my life. It came from my past. But wait a minute, Adrien, you always say there's nothing but the present moment, right? This is true, because this is now. But the now that I was living then, okay, I hope this isn't confusing. The now that I was living then, when I was 19, was a now that carried a lot of my childhood and the traumas that I went through and the things that had happened and the ways that I didn't know how to deal with it and the ways that I was dealing with it, if that makes any sense. That was all encompassed in there. It was all part of that moment. We all have places where we've been hurt. Traumas, you might say. Places where somebody's injured us, whether it's physically or emotionally. And these are wounds. These are holes. Can you feel that? Quite often when we're chasing something or running, we're trying to fill that hole, but we're running from the pain, the demon, of what that hole left, if that makes any sense. The residue of that experience. The charge is another, to use an energetic. One of my wife's favorite teachers, Anna Dea Judith, uses that terminology. It's really wonderful. I love it a lot, and I love her as a teacher too. She talks about it as a charge. Now, she talks about that in many different ways, but this is another way. This is like a deep wound charge. There's an energetic injury, charge in there that has, because I didn't. Let's just keep talking about me. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know what was happening. when it was happening when I was really young, I didn't even understand what was happening in a certain way, if that makes any sense. It left this charge in me, this hole, funny enough, though. How do we deal with this hole, this very real pain, this very real charge? That's kind of why that makes sense too, because sometimes it can be like that. It can be like a shock, right? If it, depending on what it is. I'm talking about some, well, I'm not talking about specifically, so you don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about some pretty big things. It could be the way that your husband has hurt you in the past, the way that your wife has hurt you in the past. They said that thing, and maybe they meant it, maybe they didn't, and it hurt, and it left that pang. And the next time it comes up, or you think about, you remember, right? They do something that reminds you of how they hurt you. Charge in a way. Can you feel it? We're afraid of that. That feeling, that pain, that charge, that hole. To feel that is very challenging. To run from it is to involve everything in your life with it. Everything that you're trying to fill that hole with, you taint with that pain that you don't want to feel. Does that make any? Because now you're asking that thing, like if I were to be asking my wife to fill that piece of me, right? That missing part, that thing that hurts inside. Some of that pain would be discharged on her, and our relationship could be tainted by that. And to be sure, I say that we didn't do that, for of course we did, in many different ways. But fundamentally, we always were aware of the fact that was. I think that was helpful and useful for our relationship. I encourage you that if you find yourself slipping into that concept of this person's going to fill me, complete me, right, as the saying goes, you might want to check yourself on that. It's not going to work that way. I've often what's the word I'm looking for? Credited my wife for helping me tremendously, and it's true. But still, in the end, I'm the filter through which all of life proceeds, right? I had to open before I could receive anything from my wife anyways. When I think back on it now, too, so much of what and who my wife was and what she was offering me fell on deaf ears and eyes and hearts in a way because I didn't know how to open and accept it. It took decades, or a decade at least, before I started to really learn that. And part of that was because I stopped running. I stopped running and chasing so much to fill this pain. This pain that we don't want to feel. I feel like I'm wandering. I don't want to wander. I want to go back to this very specific thing. How do we deal with it? How do we deal with deep inner hurt? It's dangerous to give advice like this when I don't know who I'm talking to. So I want to say that careful. I want to be careful in what I say. But inevitably, we must face it. We must face the fear. Now, we don't have to relive it totally. That's the funny thing. We just have to be willing to feel the pain. Now, I say I want to be careful because I don't know the amount of pain that you're in. And so to dump that amount of do this sort of thing, right? That amount of, taking on something like that by yourself might be more than you can deal with. So you might need counseling. You might need a spiritual advisor. You might need Life coaching is another great. I talk about these three things. There's so many different ways to go about it nowadays. That's a wonderful thing about what the time and space we live in right now. They can all help you with that. So if you're experiencing something really dark, really heavy, you may need to look to somebody else to help you, to guide you, to be there for you. Inevitably, it's your game. It's your the onus is on you. You're going to have to deal with it, right? But it is helpful sometimes to have somebody there while you're doing it, to help guide you, to say, hey, look, you're being a little too hard on yourself, right? I don't think you need to own all of that, or I don't think you need to feel all of that right now. Maybe just take a little, this is the sort of thing the kind of guidance that could be helpful. The connection with another human being, the moment we feel connected, this pain is you can deal with it easier. So, I would always advise that. They say if you to find the right guru. How do you know if it's the right guru for you? They say that you fall in love with him. And that's a very deep connection, right? Now, I'm not sure that's appropriate for you or where you are, if that's what you're looking for or not. But that's one of the deepest teachers, right? A guru, like the true essence of the word, right? Someone who shines light into your life. How do you know if that's the right one? Well, you love them. They inspire some deep love inside of you. And that's because when they do that too, they start to close that void because you feel deeply connected to them. And you open. Now, you can have that with a therapist too. Now, we have to differentiate. In English, there's only one word for love. That makes it kind of complicated, right? So we're not talking about a romantic love. We're talking about usually more of Abba, right? The fatherly or motherly love. To have that connection helps ease the pain right away, because that pain is caused by that, by the way. The pain is caused by that feeling disconnected, right? When we feel anxious, when we feel depressed, we feel extremely isolated. We feel all alone. Like no one understands us. And often, least of all, ourselves, right? We don't even understand ourselves. To face that actually is very useful. It's painful to realize that we don't know who we are. But once we start to realize that, we are actually onto something. It's the wise man knows he doesn't know, sort of. Does that make any sense? This is part of wherever you go, there you are too. I don't know if you can feel that, because wherever you go, if you don't know who you are, then you don't know where you are. You are the filter. If you don't understand you, how are you going to understand what's going on around you? How can you expect what is around you to fill you? You don't even know who you are. This gets to the crux of it. Now we're at this place that's very real. Have you ever thought about who are you? I'm not talking about your name. I'm not talking about your age. All of these things can change and do change, right? You might get married and change your name if you're, well, actually, I shouldn't say anybody can do that now, which is a wonderful thing, right? Obviously your age doesn't stay the same. Your body doesn't stay the same. Nothing stays. But who are you? Is there anything that stays the same? Knowing this, is there a question? Okay, let me. Actually, I don't know if I even need to finish the sentence. Let's hear the question.
Avoiding things or letting things slide, things that annoy or hurt us. Do you think that many of us believe that this is an act of letting go? But are we really letting go?
Ooh, man. Somebody sounds like somebody has done some searching, I would say, has done some inner work to know the subtlety and nuance of that. The duck, right? Let everything roll off your back. I know a good friend of mine always said they called him that. Right? You let everything roll off his back like water, right? But he wasn't, right? He wasn't letting go. The key to understanding the difference between those two things is why, maybe, is getting to the closer place. Why are you doing? Are you running? Are you chasing? So in other words, do you not want to feel the pain that person just caused you? So you just let it roll off. You just pretend like it didn't bother you, right? If that's the thing, now this takes some clarity. Again, this can be why it's useful to have a spiritual advisor or a life coach or a therapist, right? Because they can help you say, I'm listening to you, but it sounds a little bit like it really did bother you, but you're trying to act like it didn't bother you. Do you know what I mean? This takes some inner awareness to see that. But that's certainly the telltale sign is going to be that. Like, are you willing to feel that? Do you have a sense of your own authentic personal power? That's the thing I'm always talking about, or I don't talk about it enough, actually, that where you can deal with it. If you're always running or you're always letting things slide, that's because you don't probably feel up for dealing with it. That was the reality for me. I didn't even know how to begin. That was part of the problem. So we definitely need to be careful about misusing the terms, actually, probably, right, of allowing and letting go. We're not allowing and letting go to avoid the heavy lifting. Does that make any sense? It's actually the opposite in a way. We allow because we're willing to allow it to come in. We let it go because we're willing to let that pain move. We can become very attached to our pain, especially when we didn't know how to deal with it, right? So there it is all the time. Because we haven't figured out how to allow and let go. So there it is, that charge, that hole. And we start to identify with it. This is who I am. This is my story. I could tell you right now, man, you know how many times I've told the story of hitchhiking across the country for 6 months? I lived off of that story for a long time, right? People, ooh, wow, right? I identified with it. I have lots of stories like that, right? Lots of stories that I've shared because I identified with them, if that makes any sense. But they were a way of getting us, it was a cheap way of getting a sense of this authentic personal power. Wow, you must be really in touch with your power because you were willing to hitchhike across the country with barely no money. And right, it was funny thing is, I actually did start to get a sense of that, right? You put yourself in these situations that you got to deal with them. And once you realize you can, there is a sense of power to that, for sure. But there was a very, very limited sense of power. But it was the beginning, probably, for me, honestly. It's part of why I look back on that. I wouldn't change that experience, even though I was running and chasing, right? I'm sure whoever asked the question or whoever's watching, you have plenty of experiences of running and chasing. That's okay. This is how we're figuring it out, right? This works, that doesn't. Does that make sense? I definitely was trying to figure that out, and I did find some stuff, right? I tasted freedom even in a certain way. It was circumstantial, as I said. It came and went. But there was a sense of, there is this experience. I just didn't realize that it was coming from me. What I experienced in Key West, that joy, that peace, that freedom, I experienced all three of those things like in a really deep way, was because I had no reference to that place when I showed up, right? I knew nobody. I had nothing. I was very open. That's part of why I experienced what I experienced. So then, oh, that's the place. I go back there. I'm expecting this certain experience. It's not all fresh and new. Now I know all the streets. I know some people, blah, blah, blah. You see it, right? I'm trying to recreate something that's not authentic anymore, and I'm not so open anymore. I already have this idea. I'm not living in the moment like I was when I first arrived. I hope that's useful because hopefully it shows how some of that works, how we twist it, right? Your first love, so natural, so open, right? At least I hope. I hope that you've all experienced something like that. Very rarely is our first love our final love, if you will. But then we try to recapture that. We even try to recapture that in the relationship, but the relationship is constantly changing. We're constantly changing, right? This is part of the clue. I've dialed into this a little bit, and I want to stay there, dealing with this deep pain, with this deep hurt. The pain, the things that happened to me in the past that had caused this inner pain were gone, were long gone, right? Because everything was changing. So why was it still there? Because I hadn't dealt with it. Because there was this inner holding on to that pain. Part of that was because I was always avoiding it, because I was always running from it. So I never allowed it. I never allowed it to be. So therefore, because I never allowed it to be, I could never let it go. I'm feeling some of it right now. I want to allow it and let it go. Some of that pain. This is how it happens. It can be very difficult. Part of this pain, I talked about this, I believe it was last live stream, about the pain of my father passing, and I could feel it was an abyss. And I knew not to go too far into that abyss, right? Like to keep thinking and dwelling on these thoughts, ruminating on these feelings. But when I did that, thankfully, as I also expressed, I had already done a lot of spiritual work, so I knew how to allow it in without indulging it. See, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about indulging it. If I indulged it too much, it could have been dangerous. But I was able to allow it in, feel the pain, and then it naturally moved on. It took time, but it moved on. That's why I have no residue about my father's death. I have no charge. There's no hole from that. There's no hole from that. Even though my dad's gone, his body's gone, right? There's no absence. I feel none. If you have this pain, we're avoiding this empty, void feeling, this very scary, dark place. Now, it may be that you've experienced some pretty scary, dark things, and that's why it's very painful for you and you stay away. It may be not so intense, right? I'm kind of exaggerating it even. It might not have to be like that. Like I said, it could just be that you have inner wounds, insecurities, deep insecurities. You may not even have great reasons for them, but you feel deeply insecure. That's painful. To walk around with a deep insecurity all the time is painful. You are running from that pain. You're chasing things to avoid that pain. I'm encouraging you to go there. Feel that. To whatever degree you can, the next time it arises, you feel insecure. Don't run from it. Feel it. It's scary. But remember what fear is. Fear is nothing but a void. Right? There's nothing there. It's part of what we're running from, this nothingness. But here's the funny thing. There's a flip side to that void, to nothingness. It's everything. You know how I'm always talking about the three pillars to spirituality? Space, stillness, and emptiness. These are all attributes of nothing. I'm living up to my going very deep right now, I think, to taking this conversation deep. This is important, my friend. It seems like nothing, too, which is why we don't pay it much mind, right? So I always say that silence, stillness, space, we give them none of our attention, or very rarely do we. You know, if you're an artist, sometimes you will more, right? Because you realize that there's usefulness in space and emptiness, right? But we don't typically esteem them. They hold everything. You know, science has gone back to the very first split second of the universe, so they claim. The Big Bang, right? The singularity experience. Yeah. What was there before that? Nothing. All of this sprang from nothing. You may be afraid of that. I think we're having, is it streaming? Because I'm seeing signal that says we're having bad signal. Okay. Sorry, that's such a sad thing to do to that moment. The birth of the universe came from nothingness. Where did this singularity, this one single... We run from this nothingness because it feels like nothing. We think that we are something every time we say, I'm Adrien, and I had this experience, and I've had these experiences, and I have this house, and like I'm something because of that. That's the real nothing. That's the nothing that that doesn't really deliver the goods. This other nothing holds everything, is who you truly are. It's not an empty nothing, it's a very full. It's what Moses was asked to understand when God said, I am that I am. What kind of definition is that, right? But you can sense, I am. Wherever you go, if I were to change this, right? Wherever I go, there I am. Wherever you go, there I am. There you are. If you're running from that, you'll never discover this fullness that is I am, that is you. You're always going to be distracted. You're always going to be looking in the wrong place. That doesn't mean we don't get the partners. That doesn't mean we don't buy the house, build the house. It doesn't mean we don't start the business. It means that we don't ask them to deliver what they can't give. Wherever you go, I invite you to use that as a mantra. Wherever I go, there I am. Wherever I go, there I am. Here I am. Pain arises. Here I am. Joy arises. Here I am. I don't know if the freedom, the peace in that. You're not running. Here I am. Wherever I go, there I am. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your time. It's very precious.